In this episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show, I talk to a man who travelled 25,000 miles around the world by himself. Find out how next. Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. On the show, we talk to people from across the world about all things related to travel. From amazing adventures to inspiring stories to the not so well known destinations, we cover it all. You can find all of our previous podcast episodes on our Global Travel Channel website by going to www.globaltravelchannel.com. The Global Travel Channel is a collaboration between travel writers, photographers, YouTubers, podcasters, and travel bloggers from across the world. We bring you information that we hope makes your next travel experience an awesome one, no matter where you decide to travel to. You can also find the Global Travel Channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So be sure to subscribe, like, and follow us so that you can keep updated on our new content postings as and when they happen. You can now support us through our Patreon page. So for as little as the price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to produce our podcast show. So if you do like our content, go on over to our Patreon page. Now on to today's episode. Have you ever thought about packing everything in and taking off for a couple of years and cycling around the world? Well, my guest today has done exactly that. So why don't we go over and meet Imran Mughal. So Imran, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. How are you today?
Thank you, Mark. I'm very well. How about you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, where are you in the world today talking to us from?
I'm from England, UK, or the United Kingdom, and I'm from kind of like the center of the UK, which is Yorkshire, a beautiful region. My name of my city is Leeds.
Oh, you're in beautiful Leeds.
Yeah, yeah, you know it. Okay, wow, that's even cool.
How's the football team doing this year?
Oh no, Mark, don't ask me about the football. I'm not a football person, but one thing I have to say is that I would love to see my team, my home city, go into the Premiership, and they almost did it this year, but they haven't been there since 2001 or 2002. So really, it's just been a long, long time, and obviously a lot of hearts are broken in Leeds this year because of the football, unfortunately.
I was gonna say to you that when you said that you don't follow football too much, I was gonna say, does anybody in Leeds follow football anymore?
Only listen. You know what it is, Mark. Yeah, when Leeds were doing well, all these closet fans were starting to come out. Now they're almost on the Premiership, right? Okay, so the Leeds got a huge following, got a huge backing. All the fans started to come out after so many years, and now they've all gone back to the cupboards now.
Surprise!
So it's only the real faithful fans that are still by Leeds side through thick and thin, and unfortunately, that doesn't count for every Leeds fan.
Now tell me, you're in Leeds, so it must be raining today in Leeds, is it?
Actually, Mark, it's a cloudy day, but it's sunny intervals, so it's not raining. It doesn't rain as much as people think, because not like Scotland, because that's further north. But certainly, it's been pleasant here. September is usually my favorite month because it's also pretty pleasant in terms of the weather. So it's okay today, man. Yesterday was, today's good.
I love it when an Englishman says sunny intervals. It means you see the sun for about 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, 30 seconds every 5 minutes, I guess. That's pretty good, right?
Exactly. What I was going to ask you today was, when I did the intro to the show, I haven't told people. I told everybody that you went around the world, but I didn't tell them how you did it because I wanted you to share that particular side of it. So why don't you tell everybody how you actually traveled around the world?
My main mode of transport was the bicycle. So I actually cycled around the entire circumference of the world, also venturing into the Southern Hemisphere, being in the north. And obviously the only time I had to board a plane or a ferry was when I came to the end of that land and when I had to cross the waters. So I went around the world on a bicycle.
Fantastic. Now, have you ever been on a podcast show before?
I've been on a couple of podcast shows. I think I've been on. I don't know if you heard of Alistair Humphreys, who's a pretty famous
Yes.
adventurer. Yeah, he's a good friend
Yeah.
of mine. Alistair Humphreys is a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
I was on his podcast just before I just come back from a journey around Europe. So I was on his podcast like maybe a month and a half ago.
Ah.
Been on a couple of other podcasts as well a little while ago, which I don't seem to recall now. But yeah, a couple of Alice's podcasts and somebody else who I don't remember now. I think it was for a local radio or
Okay.
something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a long time ago.
Okay. Well, I hope you remember mine in the future when somebody asks you if you've been on another podcast show.
No, I will certainly remember this one for sure, Mark. Yeah.
Now, when I have somebody on my show for the first time, I normally ask them a random question about anything that comes into my mind. So I'm going to give you one as well. What's
Mm.
your favorite item of clothing to have with you when you're traveling, and why that particular piece of clothing?
It has to be my, I don't know if it's the plug for the company, but it has to be my North Face cargo pants. I wear them,
Ah,
yeah,
yes.
because obviously I wear cycling shorts underneath those, but they're just such a versatile piece of clothing. I can wear them to the mosque, I can wear them on the bike, I can wear it to a restaurant, I can wear them for anything, and it has good abrasion. It has a good resistance to clothing abrasion. It virtually never abrases, uh,
Mm.
considering how much hours I spend on a bicycle. And also, if you get wet, it dries pretty fast as well. So it's such a versatile piece of clothing.
Fantastic plug for North Face. I hope everybody at
Yeah,
North
yeah.
Face is listening, and we'll send them a copy of the podcast anyway. Yeah, when we get to the end.
And I hope they send me
Now,
a pair of cargo pants.
and me as well. I'd like a pair
Yeah.
as well. Now, I'm going to ask you all the obvious questions about where were your favourite places around the world and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
also want to dive into the philosophical side of a journey like this, because it's not every day that one decides, oh, I'm going to go and cycle around the world, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I just want to first of all understand, why did you choose to cycle around the world? What was the determining factor on taking on this challenge?
Well, there's a number of things, but firstly, I was always a keen cyclist for many years before I eventually wanted to cycle around the world. It was basically putting one on one together, really. I used to cycle a lot, around Leeds and Yorkshire, but I never kind of knew at the time that I wanted to travel wanted to travel at all until met one guy whose bicycle I saw was was a bit like the bicycle you see the one I'm traveling on. You know, he had luggage on the front, luggage at the back, and I was so intrigued by this. And
Mm,
then I met with this gentleman, and then he told me about what he was doing. He was doing a cycle trip around Europe, and that just got me so intrigued. And I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. I want to travel. I love cycling, so I'm going to put one on one together, and I'm going to do them both together. So
mm,
that was kind of like where it initially began from. But becomes a
mm,
lot more philosophical in terms of why I chose the bicycle, because really
mm,
the bicycle, you are vulnerable to an extent where you know vulnerable is usually a kind of like a negative term almost, if you like, being vulnerable. But on the bicycle, it's one of the most beautiful things because it really does open the world to you.
mm,
You don't have a glass like a car or a metal surrounding you. You're truly out there. So you
mm,
feel the temperatures, you feel the rain, you feel every gradient. You are more in connection with the culture. It really is kind of being out there, so to
mm.
speak. You're truly out there. You're not sheltered from anything, and your vulnerability also becomes your ticket for amazing hospitality that comes your way when you do a
Mm.
journey of this nature.
Yeah, so. When you talked about getting into cycling, was it something that, were you one of these people that used to sit down religiously and watch the Tour de France and things like that, or was it just general cycling in your local area and with a bunch of people?
No, never had any affiliation to racing. It was just simply that one day when I was 18 years old, I was just always in the same area. And it just dawned on me when I was with my friend, just to like, let's just get out and, get out this area and explore a little. And
Mm,
just randomly, for some reason, I hadn't cycled for a few years at this point because I used to have a little bicycle when I was at school, and then I went into college and I never rode the bike and I kind of forgot about the bicycle. And then to my friend, I said, okay, well, I don't know, why don't we just get some bicycles and just get out the area? And then a few days later, I managed to get a bicycle as well with my friend, and we started cycling around the area first, and then
You weren't inspired by bicycle racing, cycling as such. You were just inspired by getting out there and exploring. Is that right?
just yeah, initially just getting out and exploring my local area more than anything, and it all started from there. I started to realize how the distances which I was going to by bus or a car were so easily manageable on a bicycle, and that's the kind
Mm.
of thing that really took me aback. And I thought, my goodness, I can go everywhere I need to do on a bicycle. So I became heavily dependent and on my bicycle since then, really, to get around generally.
And when did it come into your head about wanting to actually go around the world? Was there kind of a epiphany overnight, one night, that you decided, right, I'm going to cycle around the world, or how did that come about?
Mhm. The idea was always kind of there, but for some reason I never put one and one together
Mm.
until once I was on a local ride and I saw this bicycle that was heavy laden, like the bicycle that you've seen on my YouTube
Mm.
channel. And there were bags at the back, there were bags at the front, and I just thought to myself, my goodness, whoever owns this bike, he's either going far or he's come from far and he's on some kind of journey. So he wasn't with the bicycle initially. I think he just popped off into the village hall of this little village, and then he came out, and then I had a chat with him, and then he told me that he was on this big trip around Europe.
Mm.
I was so intrigued that I said, okay, well, I exchanged details with him, and I said, when you get back, then please get in contact. I'm really interested in doing this. So,
Mm.
so that's when it kind of occurred to me that, oh my goodness, I wanna do the same. I like cycling and I want to travel. So, let's combine the two and see what comes of it. You know,
What was his nationality?
he was Dutch, so he was from Holland
Mm.
or the Netherlands.
Mm. He was probably
And
born on a bicycle.
Yeah, they're all born on a bicycle. I just come back from there. My goodness, it's just the most amazing country for the bicycle highways. I don't even call them lanes. They're highways over there. Bicycle. It's some absolutely of another level.
It is a
But
great country to cycle in, and one of the great things about it too is it's predominantly flat everywhere, so it's so easy to get around as well, isn't it?
yeah, it is. But also, there's an area in the southwest of the Netherlands called Limburg, and this
Mm.
area borders Germany and Belgium to the south. And this is a very, very hilly region. I mean, in fact, one of the one-day races that happens there, which is also Holland's most famous race, which is called the Amstel Gold Race,
Mm.
it's the most hilliest one-day race on the calendar
Mm.
of a
Mm.
one-day race, and it's in Holland. So
Mm.
even there, the infrastructure is the same with the bike lanes and the infrastructure. It's no less in the hillier place than it is in the flat.
Mm.
So they're really kind of invested in the bicycle and the bicycle lanes, and that kind of shows with the people.
Now, you've just upset all my Belgium friends because they're going to say to me that the Tour de Flanders is much more hillier than the Amstel Gold Race, and that the Liège-Bastogne-Liège is also more hilly than the
Mm.
Amstel Gold Race. Yeah, so got a lot of friends in Belgium. I've got to look after them.
Well, if they look at the stats, they will find that most climbers accumulated in that Amstel Gold Race. But they were going up some of these climbs several times, as they would do in the Liège-Bastogne-Liège. They would go up some of the climbs several times. So I'm I'm sorry to upset them, but I can kind of see I can kind of see where the upset comes from for sure. But certainly
Well,
the Flanders is a hard race. Flanders is surely a hard race. It's probably
Flanders
a
is
harder
difficult.
race.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you decided that you would take on this big epic journey of cycling around the world, how did you come up with a plan, or did you even have a plan? Cycling out of Leeds, where did you go to next? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I've done a few tours since then. When I met this person, we agreed to cycle the whole length of the Alps the year after,
Mm.
and then we cycled around Scotland and Scandinavia the following year in 2004. And then I kind of just forgot about it really. I went into work, and I thought, okay, I've done a good few journeys, and then my work was just so mind-numbingly boring, unfortunately. It was a call center job, and it was very repetitive.
Mm.
And I would just think to myself, there's got to be more to life than this. And
Mm.
and I just and then in my downtime at work, I stumbled across Alistair Humphrey's
Mm.
traveling blog, and he was at the back end of his cycling around the world journey.
Mm,
And then I started to wonder, my goodness, this guy's the way he wrote things, the way he described things, just started to make me realize the possibility, right? Maybe one day I can do the same. Maybe I can cycle around the world as well. And it wasn't until 8 years after that until I
mm,
actually got on my bike and did the thing, because the reason why I probably put it off that long is because of doubt and fear more than anything.
mm,
Surely I can't do it, and then there was doubt, and then there was fear, and then there came a time in 2012 where at this time I was working for the health service, for the National Health Service on the administration side,
mm,
and the government were having a lot of cutbacks in the government sector. So council workers, health workers, administration side were losing their jobs, and unfortunately, or should I say, fortunately, my job came up for the coal.
mm,
And at that point, I committed to a journey in December. I was going to be made redundant the following year, but it was uncertain at that point. But I committed myself to a journey of cycling Route 66. I
mm,
watched a
mm.
I watched a Billy Connolly's documentary.
Oh, fantastic. That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
awesome, wasn't it? Yeah.
it was,
Mm,
and it was off the back of that journey. And I have a separate YouTube channel about my Route 66. But it was off the back of that I said, okay, I've never been to America. I've never kind of traveled alone properly on my
mm,
bicycle. I've always been with somebody,
mm,
even if I have been myself for a brief period. I
mm,
thought to myself, right, I'm committing myself to this journey.
mm,
My redundancy was confirmed a few months after, and then a couple of months after that, I packed my bags and I got a charity on board, and I cycled the whole length of Route 66, going
mm,
from Chicago to Los Angeles to Santa Monica, and then I carried on even further, going up the coastline from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
mm,
And that journey really defined a lot of things for me, showed me a lot of possibilities of what was. And and then after I came back from that journey, my father, unfortunately, he had been ill for a number of years at this point,
mm,
and it was only shortly after my Route 66 journey that he passed away from a long illness. And then
mm,
it kind of made me realize that health is not a given. We have this window in our life to do things, and we should grab that chance, because it's not always a given, and it may not come around. So obviously, I was grieving at this point. It took me a little while to kind of get up on my feet and start say, okay, like I got to get on with life and try and do things. And a few months after that, I committed myself to, right. I'm not finding work here. It's very hard, and there's
mm.
nothing much, not much prospect going for me over here. I'm just gonna cycle. I'm just gonna go for my dreams of cycling around the world. I've had this dream harboring in my mind for 7, 8 years. It's either now or never. So I came to that crossroad, really.
Mm. That's really interesting. So along the way, you had, first of all, you did other epic big rides to get, I guess, connected to long distance cycling,
That's
and you
right.
had other people who were kind of like, I guess, stepping stones and mentors. You had the Dutch guy, you had Alistair Humphreys, and then you had your father's passing, which I guess was a significant process in getting you over some of those fear factors that you had about doing this. Would that be correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, there was always fear. There's always fear because I remember the preparation to the journey itself was marred in fear. Thinking of all, this is not safe Europe where I'm used to. This is like the whole world we're talking about here. You're
Mm,
vulnerable to an
mm,
extent where, I was mourning at the same time, but I was waking up sometimes in the middle of the night crying, not knowing where I was, and just in fear of this journey. Like, oh my God, I don't know if I should do it. And, maybe it sounded good and nice and poetic, but to actually do it, now to put it in reality, is something
mm,
else. But one thing I learned from that was two things actually. To be fearful of something is a great thing, and to face that fear is even a better thing.
yeah.
And also the apprehension is the hardest thing about the world journey. The hardest thing for me about going around the world was all the preparation and the apprehension before that. One thing I really realized that the apprehension was the hardest
Mm,
part of my world journey, was the preparation and knowing what may go wrong or what may not go wrong. All these thoughts and negative thoughts that creep in your mind. But once the wheels get rolling, once you've packed your bags, once you've had that courage to say, okay, I'm going to do it, and pack your bags, then you just get on with the task in hand, and then a different mindset all just takes over
mm,
automatically. And I'll never forget that feeling between being really fearful to then being on the bike to saying, okay, right, let's just do
mm.
this. And Yeah, what an amazing step that
Do
was.
you share that with your friends and family members to the stage where you kind of brought them along that part of the emotional journey with you, or did you really wait until you were 100% sure in your mind that you were going to do it before you actually announced it to them?
Well, I didn't really announce that I was going around the world at that point. I didn't even know myself whether I was going around the world.
Mm,
My all I had in my mind was a checkpoint, and that checkpoint was Singapore.
mm-hmm,
Uh, I just said to people, right, I'm going to China or Singapore. I'm going to cycle all the way there. I didn't say I'm going around the world
mm,
because I didn't want to announce that I'm going around the world because it's just too much of a thing to take on to think, okay, right, see you guys, I'm going around the world. I'll
mm.
see you in 12 months or whatever. So no, I just said that, listen, I'm going for a long bike ride here. I'm just going to go all the way to China or Singapore, see if I can get there. But in my own mind, I said that, okay, let's see if I can get there first. And if I can get there, I'm going to then assess how I'm doing mentally and physically.
So I find that really interesting because you just said that you didn't actually set out with a plan to cycle around the world. You said you were going to go to
Mhm.
either Singapore or China.
That's right. I mean, like I said, just to announce that you're going around the world and thinking of the variables and the distance, and that was just daunting within myself. I didn't even believe at that point. I was just gonna roll the dice and go with it. Let's just see if I can get to Singapore, and then if I do get to Singapore, then I will assess how I'm doing mentally and physically to want to go on.
Mm.
And luckily, at that point, when I was in Singapore, I was like, right, I'm nowhere even near done yet. Right, we're going to carry on going. And that was my thought when I was in Singapore. And that's when I said, right, I'm going to cycle around the world. To the point when I got to Java in Indonesia, I saw this guy who was making number plates on the side of the road. And then I said to him, okay, can I have this as a number plate? And it said cycling the world.
Oh, fantastic.
And I was that committed that I even have a number plate made when I got and then I put that number plate on throughout Australia, New Zealand, and USA until I got back home. Really.
Mm. So tell me, getting from Leeds to Singapore, it's quite a long way to go. So what route did you actually choose to go?
So I started from England, then
Mm-hmm,
I went through France, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, which is a tiny country that you have to zoom in to actually see.
mm-hmm,
Then Austria, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Greece, Turkey, Georgia. And after Turkey, I didn't want to go straight into Iran. So we went to the Caucasus, going through Georgia and Armenia, then right across Iran, going across it, and from the top to the bottom. And then it was my first book. After Iran, then it was the first time my bicycle wheels had to leave the earth since I came to France from England, because that was in the initial intended route. Actually, there were some changes along the way because of losing out on visa games, so to speak.
mm.
And then I went across the United Arab Emirates, then down to Oman, then I went across to India, then China, then Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, going through Sumatra, Java, and Bali. And I went right across Australia from Perth to Sydney, then to New Zealand, and then right across America into Canada, and then back into Europe, going through Portugal, Spain, France, Portugal, Spain, France, Belgium, and then Belgium back to the UK.
Mm. Now, you've just said that oh so quickly that it makes it sound like a trip around the world is so easy and so fast. How long did that whole journey take you?
It took me 15 months, and in that time, I crossed 40,000 kilometers through 33 countries and 4 continents.
That's pretty fast, 15 months to do that trip.
You know, a lot of people say that, but I kind of stopped where I wanted to stop, and my jaw of a journey is always moving. Really, I don't. Every time I have to stop, particularly if it's been more than a day or two, I always kind of feel like my journey is over. So really, I guess the drive for me is just moving more than anything.
Mm.
But I did stop 2 weeks in Iran, in Tehran, playing the visa games, trying to go on to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, which unfortunately failed.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I had to stop a couple of weeks in the Arab Emirates or Dubai to get my ongoing visas made towards China and India.
Mm. Now, I was
Yeah.
watching I want to specifically bring that up with you today. I was watching one of your YouTube videos, and it was the one where you had arrived into the United Arab Emirates at the airport and you were unpacking your bike from the cardboard box. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but that's actually not my world journey. That's my revisit to Oman, which was like 2 years ago.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
the one where I was actually cycling around the world in Oman, you have to scroll down a lot further to one of my earlier videos when I'm going across Oman from the UAE. So that was that could actually I sailed into the United Arab Emirates from Iran. So I wasn't packing my bike like that. And that video was maybe about 4 years after I'd returned.
Oh, okay.
And that was a revisit to Oman, basically.
You're like a serial cyclist guy that doesn't stop. Is that right? Like, are you going to go back and do it again?
What, around the world?
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I never say never, but the thing is, I've just come back from a journey that I did about 5,000 kilometers through about 6-7 European countries, and for me, I think mentally, to do something at that length alone is that I think that's the last one for me now. To be honest with you, I think I've overexposed myself to traveling like this, where the novelty has kind of worn off now to an extent. Traveling alone with somebody else, it's a different scope, and certainly I have a journey planned for next year, which will probably be my last big one. But for sure, I mean, I'm happy with what I've already done. There's no real incentive now to kind of pack my bags, put it on my bike, and get going. But who knows what I'll feel like in 3-4 years time and how I'm doing physically. So I never say never to that. But for now, I'm just kind of done that, to be honest with you. Especially when I've just come back.
How old are you now, Imran?
I'm 40 years old now, Mark.
You're 40 years old, so you must be super fit for a 40-year-old.
Mark, I'm always cycling, so I think the fitness part is a side effect more than anything. I just love cycling. I just love getting around on the bike. I love riding the bike fast. I have other bikes which I ride fast.
Yeah.
And for that are made for more speed. Carbon fiber, the fancier bikes.
Yeah.
But really, when it comes to doing the journey, then I always I can adapt to lugging around a heavy bike and compromising the speed, and more like you become more like a tortoise basically on a bicycle compared to what you're used to. So really, this fitness part is really the side effect. If it was bad for you, I'd still do it.
Now, look, I just wanted to ask you something funny about the cardboard box, and I don't really care that it wasn't on the round the world trip, but I watched the video and I watched you meticulously taking your bicycle out of the cardboard box at the airport inside this magnificently pristine, clean airport terminal. And you've got your greasy bicycle on the floor and you're putting it all together wonderfully well and you're explaining everything that you're doing. And then all of a sudden we see a shot of you coming out of the airport door and heading off on your journey. And I always wondered what happened to the cardboard box.
Well, obviously, whenever you get to an airport, and now I actually, when I went around the world, I did pack my bike like that when I had to get on a plane. So you kind of saw a glimpse of what I had to do when I was going around the world. But the box, all that litter you saw around the box with the protective stuff and the cardboard. After that shot where I walk off, I actually did go back, put everything in the box, and then you just put the box aside because there is no bin there. There's no bin in any airport for security reasons. And the janitor or the caretaker of the airport, the cleaners, just take it away. Yeah. And that's the case anywhere you go. You just leave the box aside. You're not supposed to take it to any big, because they'll have all the access to the big bins where they would dispose that. So you just leave it to the side because many cyclists come there and assemble a bike and then they have to leave the box there because there's nowhere to put it in. They don't have access to the place where the porters have access to, so they have to just leave the bike there. The box is there and the porters take care of it.
I just wanted to share that with you today on the show because it was one of those moments that brought a huge smile to my face, and I was thinking it would be a very apt scene for a Billy Connolly film of you disappearing out of the airport without the bike box. That's all.
Well, that's the great thing about cycling, it's like, when you bring your bike like that and you take out the box and you assemble it, pack your bags on the bike,
You literally roll out the airport. There's no itinerary. There's no calling the taxi. There's no waiting for a shuttle bus.
Yeah.
You just simply just roll out.
You roll out, yeah. Now, going back to when you were talking about some of the visa issues, I know there's a lot of people listening to the show today who are keen cyclists and probably want to take on some of these rides that you've done. What was your strategy when it came to visas? Were you getting visas at borders, or how were you working that?
Well, you obviously we have the internet to hand, so we really compare an advantage to know which countries require that you have the visa beforehand, or which countries give you it at the border. So the first country I came across where I actually needed to have the visa in the passport before I got to the country was Iran. Every country before Iran, I was walking to the border and they would give me the visa there and then at the border.
Yep.
Other than Georgia, which became very tricky because it was a very difficult country to get into for other reasons. But so I know which countries required the visa before and which would give you at the border, sometimes for free, sometimes at a cost. But it was Iran, China, Vietnam. They were the three countries where I need a visa beforehand, and also Australia. I needed to get an e-visa arranged before I came into Australia. And you're doing you're doing this on the road as you go along, and you're doing it probably a country or two before you get to the country where you would require a visa. So you kind of do it as you roll, really, because to plan all this meticulously before is a bigger task, in my opinion, because things can go wrong, things can change, plans can change, routes can change. So really, it's always best to do it a country or two before the country that requires a visa.
Did the Leeds football team invite you into their stadium on your grand depart when you left Leeds?
No. Unfortunately, there's no affiliation or link with me and the football team here. You know, so it doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, you know, it's like when I left my home, it was very low key. You know, we were just basically saying bye to my family more than anything. And then it was just a ride down to London to visit to link up with my friend, and then me and my friend cycled together to Arabia for the first. We cycled together for the first 4 months before we split in Arabia, and then I kind of went my separate way for remaining 11, 12 months after that. So very, very lucky. Nothing like a stadium, no send-off, no party poppers or anything like that. You know, just rolling down my street and, you know, looking back really and thinking, wow, will I ever see this place again?
So how was that emotionally? What were kind of some of the emotions going through your mind other than, will I ever see this place again? Was it a sense of relief to actually be underway and to start the journey?
Definitely, because as I was saying earlier, that the anticipation was the nightmare for me more than anything. Just, you know, just that moment of like, okay, I've got to prepare this, I've got to prepare that, and the anticipation keeping me awake of what can go wrong. So really, once my wheels got rolling, it was a completely different mindset to the preparation game. Once the wheels were rolling, it was a relief, like, oh, I'm glad I'm here now. I'm glad I can finally get rolling now. And all those emotions and all that anticipation had kind of disappeared. And now I can just concentrate with the task in hand that I've set for myself, which was to Southeast Asia at that point.
Where were you staying each night? What was the strategy when it came to bedding down for the night?
It depends where you were. For example, if you're in a city, then you'd either look for a hostel or a cheap accommodation. But certainly when we were out, in the sticks, in smaller towns, then we would just find somewhere to camp, wild camp. So it's just a case of finding a park or sometimes a campsite, which was quite prevalent in all over in Europe, in Western Europe certainly. And after that onwards, it was just kind of like finding a place wherever you can find. And sometimes I would camp, under highway bridges, sometimes next to a lake, sometimes. So that's the spontaneity of it. You just don't know where you're going to sleep that night. Was always always kept you on edge, really, to find a good camp spot. And many times I got hosted along the way as well. So invite you to their house, or sometimes people would open their gardens so you can have a nice pitch to pitch in. Sometimes you have to ask, can I tent my tent here? So it's subjective to where you were, really. But every time I was in a big city, I would always get some accommodation until I was in New York, where I found myself in a situation where I had to sleep on the streets.
Yeah, I saw that down by the Hudson River.
That's right. Yeah, by the Hudson River. You couldn't find a, and I just sensed that. Oh well, by that time I was at the back end of my world journey then, and I kind of sensed where was a good place to camp or not. I got to River Hudson on the 4th of July out of all days. That night, I can hear all the fireworks going off downtown Manhattan. And not knowing where to go, I headed down the River Hudson, and I saw this tennis court and these big steps behind the tennis court.
Yeah.
And I saw these late night joggers, and I said to myself, well, these must be the locals. And if this place was not a safe place to jog at night, they would not be jogging, or people be walking. I think it was safe, and then you kind of get that intuition of where is a good place or where is a safe place to sleep for the night.
So was that something that increased in terms of your connection to your intuition throughout the whole trip? You became more and more intuitive of things like that as the trip went on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of times I used the mask of the night to camp. I mean, I found myself cycling well beyond sunset, and then it's a case of finding where to camp. Really, one of the greatest stories was when I, going across the Nullarbor in Australia, and then pulling up to a little town called Minipur, it was early in the day, and my intention was just to knock on this house door. Well, it wasn't a house. I actually walked into the house, but it looked like a shop from the outside. It was a house. It was once a shop, but it was a house, and I walked in, put the steps in, and the guy was like, "Okay, no, this is my house. It's not a shop." And then I said, "Oh yeah." And then I got talking to the guy, and he was very friendly, and he gave me some water, and then I was mentioning the countries that I passed, and then on mentioning Bosnia, his wife just came out. What? How am I here in Bosnia, in this little town? Because she was from Bulgaria.
All right.
And then she mothered me. I mean, she heard about my story and what I'd done, and she would not let me leave.
Yeah.
And she made the bedding for me in the house where I could sleep. She made me a nice roast dinner, and she just mothered me for the whole day, And then the next day they sent me off with like $50 for the road. But sometimes that have situations like that. So you really don't know. It's a spontaneity. It's so spontaneous where you're going to stay or where you're going to. But certainly when you're traveling like that, you get the knack of where you can camp. And I used to camp in some weird places. Sometimes I look back and think, how the hell did I actually do that? So you just it's something you learn as you go along. It's not something that can be taught, because I never picked up a book or a manual. I never looked at anybody's website of information. It's just kind of like, okay, I need rest. I got to find somewhere that's quiet and out of view. Those two aspects mainly. Somewhere out of view was always the first priority.
Yep.
This campsite outside of view, yeah.
How does one budget for a trip like this? What do you kind of allow yourself per day for living expenses?
Well, your main expense really is food more than anything. So budget was, I had savings, so I wasn't on a ridiculously tight budget, because I did get the odd hotel here and there, particularly going across America. So really, your main expense would be food, and obviously accommodation you would keep as cheap as possible. But because of the nature of the way you're traveling, and the fact that you're camping most nights, would give you a lot of leeway really to get the odd hotel, and where you can have a nice bed and a shower for the night. So really, it was, other than the flights and the food, really that was the main expense. So I wouldn't really calculate my budget. I would just think, okay, well, I'll just spend what I would know that was comfortable, what I know I had. I knew my budget was well in range. So I wasn't at a point where I think, okay, right, I'm running low in funds now here. I better start cutting the route short, or I better start, cutting my budget so I can, make the money last longer. So I never came into that situation, because the very nature, like I said, the very nature of how you're traveling cuts costs in many ways.
What did the whole sense of doing it on the financial aspect that you did do it on, what did it make you realize about the value of money and also the importance of money in one's life?
Well, certainly coming from the UK, obviously your money would go far the further east you went, until I got to Australia. It didn't make me, I wouldn't say per se what I had financially, but what I would say is that it really made me realize how much we have being in the Western world, or or in a country, especially when you go places like Indonesia and Australia. But India and Indonesia. When I was in India, I really saw a lot of poverty there, to the point where it made me homesick and very, very sad. And I was thinking about my father's words a lot, when he used to say to me a lot, go to India, then you realize the true value of life and what it means, basically. And my dad used to say that for years. I didn't know what it really meant. So I really saw the value of what we do have and what we take for granted by being in some of these places, and also realizing that some of the places where it's the poorest are the happiest too. So it's not necessarily that wealth correlates to happiness at the same time, but it's good to have for peace of mind and for financial stability and comfort. But so more than anything, it made me realize what I do have, not so much what I had and what budget I had, but that we really are wealthy, and we're in our own right, and compared to like your average person in India who's struggling, who's hustling to make a living. So more than anything, it made me realize what I had, what I do have, and what I have and what I didn't have.
When you were out there on the road, did the world surprise you? Did the people, did the scenery, did the whole experience surprise you on so many different levels?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, obviously, you're seeing these places. I mean, you hear about these places, but to see it for the first time is always you're always seeing the new set of eyes, no matter how many times you've seen it in a travel documentary or whatever. And the one thing that surprised me more than anything was just the people, really, the hospitality of the people, and how forthcoming and receptive people are when you're traveling in that nature. It's very visual that you're traveling in quite a laboursome way. And even when I was going through Australia, I mean, that surprised me how, I mean, I'd heard some negative things about Australia, I'll be honest with you. And I wasn't, I always give benefit of doubt, really. I thought, well, my experience has been good this far. And it was the day when I left Perth, and I'll never forget this, where I was almost about to turn around at the same time. Because as I was about 50 kilometers, maybe 30 kilometers on the outskirts of Perth, heading towards the east, a car drove by me and threw a bottle at me, hurled the bottle at me at more than 120 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
Luckily, the ball missed me. The ball missed me by a good margin. Yeah. But it was the intention that scared me more than anything. I go, well, I've heard so about Australia. Yeah. The night before I left Perth, I had an ice cream thrown at me from a moving car.
Oh, really?
And then this was in Perth, and then I thought to myself, well, the intention of somebody wanting to hit me with a full bottle like that scared me. So I thought to myself, you know what? I think I'm just going to turn around here and just go back to Perth Airport and just get on a plane and just go to New Zealand. I can't be doing with this. It's just like 2 days in a row, and I've heard some not so great things about it. And I'm glad that the side of me that's persisted and said, okay, well, just carry on going. Come what may. You can't let that negative aspect affect you. And it was very hard going further on after that incident, because every car that would go by me, I would just duck, like this person was going to throw something at me. It just made me, really cautious, and I thought, well, okay, I can't do this for the length of Australia. And then I took some shelter somewhere offside of the road. I just had something to eat. I did my prayers, and being a Muslim, and then I just got back on my bike, and then I kind of just kind of almost forgot about the incident. It happened a few hours prior to that. And then the rest of Australia was just the entire highlight of the entire journey came in Australia for me as well, crossing the North, even if it wasn't a fierce headwind. So really, I'm glad I persisted, and didn't cave into my thoughts of actually abandoning Australia altogether. So really, some things took me by surprise in terms of how hospitable people were in the country. In looking like the way I didn't expect, because I look like an Arab with my, especially with the media and the messages that go out of the Middle East, and how it's not such a great place, and the people come from there. And I was kind of adopted the Arab headwear because I found it was best for the sun, but best to eat. So I kind of adopted that headwear going throughout, so making people think I was from Arabia. with the complexion and everything, and no, I was met by nothing but with great reception, people being inquisitive about the journey, and again, it was always the same questions, and can I do something for you? Can you come and have a meal with me? And when you get to so and so, then here's my contact. And so really, it was the hospitality of the people that kept me going more than anything, because it becomes a point where after after 15,000-20,000 kilometers, you kind of get fed up of seeing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So kind of wears on you a little bit. It's not even a journey, to be honest with you. It wasn't for me, because there were a few times, like I said, I almost quit.
Look, I'm not Australian. I'm a New Zealander, but I am currently based in Australia, and it's despicable to hear that you've experienced that in this country. But at the same time, it doesn't actually surprise me, given a lot of what goes on here. And ironically, you went through countries that were on the surface, I guess, deemed to be a lot more dangerous and unforgiving than what you would expect to experience in a country like Australia. So it's a disgrace to hear that you've actually had to endure that in this country.
Well, Mark, that can happen anywhere. I mean, I was robbed of $900 in Iran. I was robbed in the journey of a lot of money. It happened to be the time I was carrying the most money. Because obviously a Visa card and MasterCard doesn't work there, so I had to carry a lot of money going through Iran. And I was held at gunpoint in another country before that, in Bosnia. So a few after that, so it can happen anywhere. I mean, it's happened many times here in the UK. I've had all kinds of cycling for well over 20 years now. I've had all kinds of things thrown at me from a passing vehicle. So it's not an excuse to straight. It can happen anywhere in the world. That's why I say it was a great experience for me. And like I was saying, it's just one of those things that can, like for example, the robbery. The robbery happened early on in Iran. It happened like in about the 5th day, and I ended up being in Iran for 45 days. And it was only after that robbery that I was almost about to quit. I was okay. When I get to Tehran, it's only about 2-3 days away. I'm getting the flight home. I'm getting a plane. I'm going home because I've been robbed and I've been shot within a month, and I'm just not. I can't. I better just catch my chips while I'm ahead. Really,
So when you say you were shot at, or you were actually shot?
I was shot at.
Right.
The bullet missed me by about a foot. Actually.
Wow.
So that happened. So and then I had a gun put to my head.
You had a gun put to your head?
Yeah, I had a gun. I was held at gunpoint. I had a gun put right to my head, thinking that was the last moment of my life.
Okay,
That
this is in Iran.
I know you have a channel here where you're trying to promote traveling, but I'm just you can obviously edit this bit out. Basically, I was camping in a place I shouldn't have been camping, that I deemed was okay, and the person just came to eliminate what he thought was a threat. And so I was shot at. A guy basically fired a gunshot into an abandoned house blindly, and the bullet missed me by about a foot. And then me and my friend were both made to come outside the house with the guns to our head, basically. And I was just reading my last prayer, really, thinking that this is where I get off, really,
Goodness gracious!
You can edit that out, because I don't. Listen, that was me putting myself in a situation where, and obviously I learned a lot from that onwards. Don't just camp where you deem is safe. Just make sure 100% that it's safe and that it's okay, and that sometimes you got to ask. So really, and then, but like I said, these are some of the negative aspects I'm talking about, even though they were big at the time. Honestly, the nature of traveling this way is honestly, hand in heart, is one of the best experiences and education of my life, because you see the world for what it is and how it is. Most people are receptive. These little incidents, negative incidents, like I said, only happen far and few in between. But the goodness of what comes from this journey, and what you learn and what you see, far outweighs even stuff like being held at gunpoint, even being robbed. Believe it or not, if you can hang in there long enough and carry on pursuing what you set out to do.
So what was it inside you that didn't make you quit after these horrendous experiences that you had, and you're on the brink of packing it all? And what do you think it was that kept you going?
In Iran, it was the people, because that day when I got robbed, for example, I'll go back to the gun incident. The next day, we were just having great meetings with people in Bosnia, and even what happened that night, after we left that abandoned house, and we met some young people in a town, the next town below, in the dark, and kind of relayed to them what has happened, and they were saying, okay, well, people don't have guns here anymore in Bosnia, not since the war. And then the guy just gave up his room for the night, you know. And then the next day, I was met by a lot of hospitality with people, having great contacts. In Iran, again, I was robbed, and then, you know, after the whole hoopla with the police incidents and, you know, them trying to make it look like that nothing ever happens to foreigners in this country, that they're all safe. After that part, you know, which was very exhausting, a couple of people were waiting outside who'd heard of what had happened, and then the next 2-3 days they kind of took us around the area, the house. We were hosted for the next 2-3 days along the Silk Road, and so it kind of like lost my faith in humanity one afternoon, only to be restored overnight. And it was the people really that said, okay, you know, it was the kindness of the people that made me kind of like forget what has happened, or kind of like make it more subtle. And I thought, okay, you know what? It made me assess, okay, well, I'm still here. I'm not, I didn't get maimed. I didn't get robbed to the point where my bike went and I haven't got my equipment. I'm here. Only money went out of the day. My health is still here. My bike is still here. And that kind of made me realize that, okay, you know, you carry on going. You carry on, the wheels carry on rolling, you know, until you can physically no longer roll, then it's a different story. But yeah, so it was always the kindness of the people's encouragement, the people's kindness that made me realize that, you know, okay, I'll carry on. You know, this is only, so.
That's a really interesting emotional roller coaster, though, compared to sitting in a call center in the UK, doing a job that you probably don't have to think twice about doing every day, and the same old happens. And then here you are on the streets of the world, and all of a sudden you're dealing with one thing after another, and your emotions are all over the place. Did it help you get in touch with yourself more emotionally and how to deal with emotions?
Well, you know, it's kind of one of those journeys where the script writes itself. There's no itinerary, you know. You know, you don't have like okay, you know, when you get a package holiday, you have an itinerary, an elaborate itinerary set out, and then you know what you're going to do. This is like the script writes itself, and you kind of deal with the emotions and what goes along as it comes. And obviously, it was a hell of a roller coaster of a journey with emotions, because obviously I was still, you know, I was missing my father a lot more than anything on that journey, because obviously he passed away, and I was thinking about my family back home. I was thinking about returning home during Ramadan, because it was the first Ramadan without my father. I was in Turkey at the time. So yeah, a lot of emotions. But one thing I was always aware of, that, you know, with this kind of journey, you have to experience a journey of this nature, particularly when you're really out there and you're laboring to get from A to B. Some days is more laborsome than others. You know, you have to taste the highs, you have to taste the lows, the lowest lows, the highest highs, and everything in between, you know. And that's in my opinion what makes a journey, is when you channel into all the emotions, when you've been as low and you've been as high, and everything in between, really. That's what makes you grow. That's what makes you grow and more mature as a person. And really, it's a real amazing education as well. You know, the spontaneity of everything, not knowing what would happen and when it would happen, and that lengthens time. I mean, like you know, every day when people go to their jobs, and you know, years fly by, months fly by, and they don't know where time has gone. You know? Doing a journey of such nature can really put a halt in time. I mean, I was only away for 15 months, but really I saw more and lived more and met more people than I'd ever done to my 34 years life previous in that 15 months. So it shows you what time that you have, how much time, whatever time you have, where it's, you know, that you can really make it count, you know.
Do you think that the timing with your father's passing and your bike ride gave you an opportunity to be in a space where you could grieve that process in a way that was different and therefore more beautiful than maybe being at home?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it was about 7 months after when my father passed away, and then I went, but I was still kind of like in the same mindset. I was like really grieving, really obviously heartbroken about it, you know, about obviously not just the passing, but just the illness that my father had to endure for the last 3-4 years of his life. And certainly when I got out on the road, it made me reflect upon him more, made me kind of understand his life more, because he used to travel a lot. He used to be a big traveler. Was my father, and really, obviously, there were times on the road where I would just be rolling along the road here, and I just think of my father, and then before I know it, tears are just strolling down my eyes. Really, I'm just really, with a lot of heartache, and at the same time, that kind of made me reflect on the great moments as well. So certainly the road and my surroundings and what I was passing by allowed me to heal in a different way. Had I been at home, really, kind of brought me more fitness more than anything, really.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one of the other visualizations that stick in my mind from watching you on some of your YouTube videos was the time where you were cycling through Detroit in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really interested to know what you were feeling when you were going through some of those streets in Detroit, and whether or not that kind of had you thinking, wow, this is the United States of America. I never imagined it would be looking like this.
Well, I actually did my research about Detroit. I mean, to think that Detroit was once the fastest growing city in the world, to the degressing city in the world, because they already had 4 of the major car manufacturing plants there: GMC, Chrysler, Ford, and another one that I probably won't remember after I get off here with you. But yeah, so I kind of realized and I knew about the downturn before, and people, and that was the face of America's downturn, the economic downturn. I mean, it's all good hearing about on the news and the Dow Jones and where the stock market is, and and seeing the figures, but seeing the downturn of seeing the economic downturn in reality is a different story to actually seeing it on a pie chart. Yeah. So Detroit was one of those cities that, oh man, I mean, it's not a place where a tourist would go through, because a lot of it's run down. You can see on that film a lot of it was. Obviously, there's been a lot of regeneration since then, especially particularly in the center. But certainly it was just seeing, this is someone's home once. This was such a thriving city, and then all of a sudden the money runs out. The manufacturing plants are moved to Mexico, where there's cheaper labor, obviously. And what effect that has on a whole city, on a whole economy. People lose jobs, houses get abandoned, the city goes into a state of disrepair, and it really makes you realize, we're all on kind of we're all basically hanging off a thread, really. If something goes wrong economically somewhere, and this obviously happens in mass effect like it did in Detroit, then really we're kind of like, nobody's safe, really. If it can happen in Detroit, it can happen anywhere. If it could happen in the fastest growing city in the world at one time, then it can happen anywhere. It was a desperation to see that, to see that, and it was really humbling,
No, I bet it was.
It was almost like a ghost town, in many places. And then you come to one corner of the center where it's really thriving, and then you go out, and then all of a sudden it's a ghost town again. It's run down, and so God knows what it was like on the people, who had to live through those changes, and to be, everything dropped in value, the house prices dropped, the whole, economically it was a real bullet, really, 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 really hard hit. And at the same time, that's kind of what fascinated me about Detroit. When you're going past the old train station that was once a thriving train station, you can see now it's a beautiful, elaborate building that's just abandoned.
Yep.
And that's kind of like the whole case of Detroit, really. And, you think to yourself, how will something like this ever come back?
Yeah.
How will it ever economically, if you had 4 big major factories here, how could Detroit ever be put back on the map again, where it once was, and it can't, if you think about it, not in our lifetime anyway. So.
Interesting. Now, I'm interested to know, you are a person that appears to be quite philanthropic in your nature, and you did this ride with a goal to support a charity organisation called Charity Water. How did all that come about?
Well, before I went on the journey, I knew that I had to represent a cause. I knew that I had to, using this as a vehicle, because it is going to be quite a big journey, that I had to get the right charity on board, and I was very selective over what I chose. And it took me weeks to find this charity, and then a friend just forwarded me this link about this charity, and I met and I saw the film of the founder of this charity, that he was actually working on a ship on a boat called for a charity called Mercy Ships, which is basically this big, massive cruise liner, which looks like a cruise liner on the outside, but inside it's a hospital. There's there's operation theaters, there's emergency units, everything in this. It's like a moving hospital. And he was a photographer working on this part of the ship called Mercy Ships. I think it was Liberia or something, and he saw obviously a lot of people getting treated, but then when he had his walkabout, he kind of made him depressed and realized how fortunate we are and how much water was an issue there, really, and getting clean drinking water that we take for granted. The water in the taps, the water in our toilet is clean, and the water they would drink. He went back and established this amazing charity. There's obviously a lot more to what I'm just saying, but obviously he went back and to establish this charity that will be clear as water as it is, pardon the pun, the funds would be 100% of what you would raise, or what a charity would raise would go 100% towards the cause, and the administration side would be covered by supporters that they have, like from many businesses, like I believe Twitter is one of the supporters, and many celebrities after more synonymous would support them. So the administration costs are covered completely through these big conglomerates and some big businesses that support the administration costs. And then everything what you raise and what people raise, for the charity itself would go 100% towards the cause. And they would tag anything that you would raise. They would tag the location where exactly where your funds have gone to, and exactly where it's going to and what it's doing, and then geotag it so you can go yourself and visit where your charity work went to. So I thought the whole clarity of the charity and what it did, and see, water is our most primary source of life. However many charities are out there, water at the end of the day is our primary source of life. There is no life without water, basically. So with it being our primary source of life, I thought, what better way to represent a charity where, representing the most important thing in our life, which is water, and then supplying clean, potable drinking water to those places that don't have access to that, like we take for granted. So really, it was a no-brainer once I did my research. I thought, I have to get this charity on board. And once I got that charity on board, and when I went across America, I actually had the privilege of visiting the headquarters when I got to New York, and the founder, who I didn't think would be in at the time. And then he gave me a little tour of the office, and I saw the whole operations there, and then the work they've done and what they do. And so really, it was a great charity in my opinion to represent, and I was happy to be like a representative of that cause going around the world.
I think I better get Scott on to my show because he can tell a story about the Mercy Ship. I think that's a good story for everybody to hear about doing good and traveling. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it goes hand in hand really. If you do anything of a big nature like that, then it's always if you have a charity you call or a cause that you support, then it's a great just by default it's a great vehicle really to raise awareness for your cause.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you go physically on the trip in terms of, did you have any injuries, accidents where you fell off the bike, scratch yourself, break a leg, anything like that happen to you?
40,000 kilometers, you think that would be the case, but I never once got ill, other than one time in India where it wasn't an illness, but it was basically a lot of the roads are broken there. So whenever a heavy goods vehicle or any car goes by you, it kicks up a lot of dust. So I was breathing a lot of dust, and that kind of made me ill, where I had to take a rest in India for about a couple of days in a place called Kanpur in India. I had to take, and then even after that, after 3 days, I got back on my bike, and all that breathing the dust kind of left me with a chest infection. So I had like a mucousy cough for maybe about a week or two after that. But after that, there's no incidents other than hitting an oil patch in China. That was the only time I came off my bike. 5,000 kilometers, I managed to just keep upright, for the most part, even in those heavy headwinds going across Australia and the steepest street in New Zealand, and never toppled over. I just kind of just hit one slick patch in China when I was there. I just was making a U-turn, not a U-turn, sorry, I was making a turn, and there was just a massive patch of slick on the road, and it was too late before I knew what it was, and then I just kind of ripped a little hole in my trousers, grazed my knee a little. It was very minor. So luckily, no incidents in that sense, or of any illness. Very fortunate. So I hear some bright stories about people getting really ill on journeys like this.
Yeah, I was interested to hear about your situation in India with the dust, and we've only got to think for a minute that you were just there for a few days in that place, and yet kids are probably going to school in that town every single day, breathing in that stuff every single day, right? And that's a way of life for them over there.
Every single day, and working inside. I mean, some of the kids that don't go to school, they're working on dump sites. If you watch my India video, you'll see that I'm going past a little recycling site where it's basically a dump site, and the kids are separating the plastic from the rest of the rubbish, because anything that's recyclable, they separate from the actual waste, and they're working in these horrendous environments barefoot, so they're working, it's only the ones that got a bit of money that go to school. Otherwise, the children there are forced to grow up pretty fast, so again, and obviously, with all that pollution, with how condensed the population is as well, and the air quality, man, it certainly does take its toll, and it would take its toll earlier, I would imagine, than in most places.
Where was the hottest place that you were?
The hottest places, I kind of got a little thermometer on my bike. I think the hottest place, there's two places actually. One was Turkey, because I was going through Turkey in the middle of summer, and I was on the approach to Ankara, and I think my friend got a heat stroke on that day as well, because he fell a little ill on the approach to Ankara. But it got to 48 degrees in Ankara, and then the second time when I saw my thermometer really spike up was when I was going through some of the arid landscape of Oman, when it spiked to 53 degrees.
Wow.
So, by that time, I'd kind of acclimatized, and when it got really hot, I'd obviously take shade and get some shelter or get some shade and let the hottest hours of the day pass.
Yeah.
But Australia was hot because you guys were still in your summer when I was there. So, but I mean, that's the heat, but it's quite high. But the hardest place I found to move in the temperature wasn't the deserts of Arabia or the deserts of Turkey or the plains of Australia in the summer. It was actually the east coast of America.
Oh, really? With the humidity, yeah.
Because obviously, when I got to the east coast of America after having crossed America, so I was like on the New England states now, like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It was obviously, it didn't get to as hot in temperatures. It got to probably about almost 40, maybe about 38, 39 degrees. But it was that mixed with the humidity. And that is a double whammy. I mean, there was times I was really struggling. And I mean, I don't know whether the journey had taken its toll at that point, but I was really limping to get through through some of those places that when it got really warm, just breathing was hard, when it's the air that dense and it's hot. But going through like Australia and Oman and Turkey, it was a dry heat, so it's manageable. Yeah, you get thirsty, but it's a lot more manageable than humid heat, for sure, definitely.
So how was it when you finished and you were heading back home to Leeds again? What was that last day of riding? Where was the finish line for you?
The finish line was actually the very street I left from. So I remember I was kind of like, after when I got to New York, I decided not to take the short way. I decided to do a little homecoming stretch, and the homecoming stretch would start from Portugal. And I would cross Portugal, Spain, France, and then finally Belgium before I got the boat back to the UK. So that whole few weeks before I arrived home was my homecoming stretch, and it allowed me to kind of contemplate. I mean, I could have just touched down into Ireland and I would have crossed full circle, or into anywhere in England and I would have been full circle. That would have been, a full circle journey. But I chose to go the long way around, starting from Portugal, because I just wanted time to soak in the journey, contemplate what I'd seen and what I'd done. And then by the time I got to England, there was a surprise finish line waiting for me at the very street I started from, which is my street. And a little surprise party for me that I was not expecting. I was just expecting to come back home and my family, my brothers and sisters would be there and maybe a couple of my cousins. But my brother had arranged this whole welcome party at home where he made a finish line and maybe about 78, maybe 100 people turned up.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's actually on YouTube if you ever watch. No, so it was but even then at the time, when you do something of that nature, that big, nothing, you can't really comprehend what you just done. Even with that home stretch, I couldn't comprehend what I've done because I've done everything without taking a break, and I've done it all at once really, and because I was still on a journey, I couldn't quite comprehend and quite take in exactly what I'd done and what I'd seen and who I'd met, and the whole last 15 months. Only when I got back and when I got a little settled and then time passed did it allow me to then take in and reflect on, because while you're on the journey, it's like, your emotions are all over the place. You can't quite take in everything because you're just in a bit of a phase, more than anything of the journey itself. That wheel stop rolling once you're back home, once you settle, once all the time has passed, then the realization of, oh my goodness, that's when I started to recall it the best when I got back.
Did you find it difficult, the fact that when you got back and that process started, that no matter how many podcast shows you did or dinner parties you had with friends or whatever, no one else could really truly connect with what you did because it's just unfathomable in terms of you've got to live the experience to be able to really understand it? Did you have a sense of that?
And well, kind of in a sense that you can't. Nobody will really understand that, and the only people who the only people who can. It's like anything else in life. If you can't relate to anybody unless they've done exactly what you've done, unless they stepped in your shoes and done that. So in that sense, I kind of guess it's like, I don't expect anybody to understand. I'm not trying to make anybody understand. I mean, I'm writing a book, so there might be quite a lot of understanding from that book that I'm trying to finish. Really, it's also you got to savor something for yourself as well. There's something that I lived, because at the end of the day, I lived it. I breathed it. I saw what I saw, and I experienced what I experienced. And no matter no matter how much of a great expresser you are of words and your emotions to other people, you can kind of bring them along the journey with you when you're talking and kind of relay, but you can never truly live that or breathe. And you can't expect anybody else to accept your journey or take your journey in the way you took it, and I completely accept that. And in a sense, it's good because I have something for myself that I'll always live with. I don't have to put it on a wall. I don't have to put it, like a collage on a wall with memories and photographs and newspaper cuttings. It's just something I have for myself, and that's kind of like my ultimate reward. It's almost like a degree that you have on a wall, something that you studied for 3-4 years. That's kind of like within inside me, something that I know I did, and something that will live with me, that I'll always be grateful for, that I had the opportunity to accomplish within myself. Whether I could relate to it or not, it's something that I did, that I lived through, and something that I'll always have within me and always cherish. And I get my own state of mind and my own knowing that I've done that will allow me to, and knowing that I can use some of the hard moments from that as reference points of other points when it become hard. It will always be something that I can look upon, really.
Did the mayor of Leeds give you the keys to the city?
No, nothing like that. No, nothing like that. Something I tried to keep it low key as possible. Really, I don't really like all the, because really at the end of the day, I'm just a dude who went for a long bike ride.
I'm a dude that went for a long bike ride. Yeah, right.
But that's all it is in a nutshell. Honestly, it's nothing more or less than that. Obviously, the emotion and everything I felt and I keep within me, but on the surface, I just went for a long bike ride.
So how has that long bike ride changed your view on the world, or has it?
It certainly changed politics is always changing anyway, but certainly changed my view on the sense that, before I left, we've heard that saying, it's a small world. Like I'm talking to you now, you're in Australia, and it's like you're on the other side of the room. It's like you're in the other room, the way we're talking. It's not directing. But I mean, when you really travel around the world, and I don't mean in a plane, unless you have to, or a car, but when you actually traverse through the world and you cross countries, and you realize, another thing is you realize that the countries are not just a squiggly line that some random guy made up. Sometimes it can be, but most of the time you find it's divided by mountainous terrain,
Yep.
rivers,
Yep.
lakes, all kinds of things. You know, there's a line there for a reason. There's territories there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me realize more than anything that this world is not a small world. It's always a big, vast world that it's always been. It's just that, you know, traveling and communication makes it seem like a small world. But when you really traverse through it, you realize that it's always a big, amazing world that it's always been. When you really travel through 1,000 kilometers, you know what 1,000 kilometers feels like, you know? Where just to go through that at a slow pace and to see the changes within that 1,000 kilometers is just profound. So that's the one thing I learned is about the world and its entirety and how big it truly is. And politics is always changing, so don't try and get too involved in that. And not people, you know, how lands are divided up through mountains and lakes, and how cultures and everything change, and people and you know, once I was catching a plane journey and I was looking out of the plane, and I was thinking about all the little houses and little lights you can see in between. That is part of the script. That's part of the journey, you know. And to bypass all that is like, you know, part of, you know, it's a big thing to bypass all that, because that is all. Everything is, you know, within its own entity, you know.
Yeah. How did you go when? That's a good point that you raised. When you came back from your trip and you went back into inverted commas normal life again, how long did it take you to adjust?
I lived this lifetime. I lived this amazing life in 15 months. That to come back and to be into normality again was definitely an adjustment period. I mean, there were times where I was a little bit sad because, oh my God, this is like, would I ever do something like that again? Can I replicate that somehow? Can I you know, anything, you know, some of the people who I met, and, you know, how will I meet them again? Or it was a real adaptation period, because now life is normal, and it's like when you look back on what you just done, it's almost like you stepped into somebody else's shoes. It's almost becomes like a dream to an extent. Like, did I really do that? Did I actually did I really get on my bike and just slip in, cycle 40,000 kilometers around the world through all those countries and have all those times? And you know, it was an adaptation period for sure. And at times it wasn't always great. You know, it made me lazy in a lot of times as well. I couldn't be asked to do anything because I wasn't motivated. I lost all motivation to do everything because now that I've accomplished my dream that I had for almost 10 years before I actually accomplished it. What do I do now? What do I do now? What's my next move? Where do I go? You know.
So what's the answer to that? What is your next move?
Well, it's been a few years since I got back from the journey, so I'm looking to do other things that. Because I got really lazy for the first 2-3 years when I got back. Now I'm motivated more than anything. It's to write my memoirs, to write a book, particularly about my Route 66 journey, which I'm going to start from that journey. I'm going to start writing a little book about that, and also writing my book around the world. And also I've got a few videos to make that edit that over the journeys I've done over the last couple of years. I did another journey this year when I went across Morocco and Algeria. A country that people don't ever step into most times, because it's one of those hard countries it's like the you can say it's like the North Korea of Africa, basically, you know.
I was going to say, like Western Australia, you get things chucked at you.
well, actually, Algeria, I mean, despite all the apprehensions you have about that country, it was one of the most receptive countries I've ever been to in my life, because they're not used to seeing cyclists and tourists.
I bet. So
really, I've got videos to make in that sense, and book writing, and also I want to do youth work as well, and inspire the youth to have some structure in their life. Not do what I did necessarily, but use the principles the same. So whatever dream and goal you have, to take these steps, to try and guide them to take some steps to gearing towards your dreams, to make these things happen, whether it's opening a business, whether it's doing the Marathon des Sables, across the desert, whether it's cycling around the world with some more relative. But the principles are the same,
Well, listen, Imran, it's been fantastic having you on the show today, and I could carry on for another 3 hours talking to you because there's so much to come out, but I'm sure that in listening to you, you've inspired somebody who's listening to not necessarily cycle around the world, but to get off the couch and to go and do something that they've believed in for a long time, because you're a guy that's proven that it can happen. You can make these dreams come true. And it's been a fascinating listen having you on the show today. So I really appreciate your time and effort to come on and share that with my listeners.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. I really, really appreciate that. It's been great talking to you as well.
And I tell you what, we're going to put the link to your videos on YouTube in the description of the podcast so everybody can go and see some of these videos. And I want to get some feedback from people if they can see where the cardboard box went.
You'll have to get in touch with the porter that works in Dubai Airport. He'll give you a better.
That's it. So listen, mate, have a fantastic day in Leeds in Yorkshire, and I hope the sun does come out for you at some stage today, and I look forward to catching up with you again sometime in the future.
Thank you, Mark, and I have to say that thank you for pondering about that box. Nobody's ever pondered about that. That's cool. I like that.
Okay, mate. Have a good one. See you later.
You as well, Mark. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All the best.
I love that. A dude who went for a bike ride. It's a great way of describing it. Well, I hope you all enjoy that fascinating insight to a young guy that decided to cycle around the world in 15 months and all the things that he got to see and do and some of the experiences he ran into in unexpected places, you could say. Hope you enjoyed that podcast as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you're looking for more of our podcast, you can get them from our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. Download them there, or if you prefer, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. There's lots of platforms that you can find to download the Global Travel Channel podcast show. Okay, that's it for this episode. My name is Mark Philpott, and I wish you all bon voyage.